Recently, I've been playing a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! But I haven't been playing Master Duel, I haven't been to a locals, and it has been months since I last opened up a pack of cards. Rather, when I say I've been playing a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh!, I mean I've been playing a lot of a very specific and special variety of Yu-Gi-Oh!, specifically, Yu-Gi-Oh! Video games. Now, the franchise is no stranger to video games, nor am I. One of the most viewed videos on this channel is my review of the False-Bound Kingdom game on GameCube. Now that game was a pretty major departure from what Yu-Gi-Oh! Really is. I mean, it's not even really a card game. The games I've been playing though are Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championship 2011 and Yu-Gi-Oh! Tag Force 5. These are two games from the 5Ds era of the franchise. This is actually the first time I played one of the Tag Force games. I was a certified Nintendo boy for most of my childhood, so I never owned a PSP as a child, meaning this pretty popular side series has remained completely untouched by me at least. In fact, this video actually began as a review of Tag Force 5. Unfortunately, there really isn't much to Tag Force. I mean, don't get me wrong, the game is great, especially if you love Yu-Gi-Oh! But it really is just playing a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! Outside of the tag duel format, it doesn't really do much that's outside of the box. I mean, maybe it does some more interesting things later on. I am still pretty early days on the game calendar, so I really just don't have much to say about it. However, it had a really odd feeling when playing the game. It was this sort of light feeling, you know, like a leaping within my soul. I mean, is this the embers of joy emerging from my cold, dark, jaded heart? I mean, yeah, actually. While playing Tag Force for the first time and replaying over the Nexus, I had something of an epiphany. I really love Yu-Gi-Oh! But more specifically, I love this era of Yu-Gi-Oh! As well as a few years plus and minus in either direction. I really, truly do love old school Yu-Gi-Oh! And I just don't get the same thrill with it that I do with modern Yu-Gi-Oh! And why is that? What's going on with it? What makes it more fun for me in the past than the present? That is the topic of today's video. I am going to dissect these two eras of the game and figure out what it is that I love about Yu-Gi-Oh! Alright, let me be clear on what this video isn't before we go any further. This is not Yu-Gi Boomer complains about the modern game. Oh, the game was so much better before you could link summon. They should ban the extra deck. Only fusions. That's dumb, and the people who make those sorts of arguments are more dumb. This video is going to be highly subjective. The point is to figure out what I do and don't like about Yu-Gi-Oh! But the modern game isn't bad because it's faster, or because cards are so much more powerful than they used to be, because I can't take some of my favorite cards to a tournament and expect to win. If anything, the modern game might be doing pretty good. I've never been one who plays Yu-Gi-Oh! On the high-end competitive level, but from what I hear from the people who do play Yu-Gi-Oh! On the high-end competitive level, the metagame might be at some of its healthiest that it's ever been. The point of this video is to dig into specifics. These two eras of the game are very different, not only in how the game is actually played, but also how the cards are designed, how decks are made, and definitely all the other stuff around the game, like anime, games, and other merchandise. Neither are inherently good or bad. They're just different, and that's fine. But my goal here is to pick these two things apart and see what makes them tick, and answer why do I seem to be having more fun with the old stuff than the new stuff. If you prefer the new stuff, that's great. Maybe the way the cookie crumbles comes out in your favor, but it doesn't for me, and I want to know why. Before we begin though, let me define a few terms real quick. When I say old and new Yu-Gi-Oh!, what am I talking about anyway? Yu-Gi-Oh! Can be broken up into many different eras, and many people have different guidelines for what these eras are, where they begin and end, and what they are even called. For my money though, I normally classify Yu-Gi-Oh! Eras by the anime. This can be a little tricky when it comes to that in-between time period, as there was something of delay for people in the West to get each anime and their corresponding card pools, but I think the general framework holds up. The eras begin with the original Duel monsters, which started in the year 2000 and ran until 2004. It then picked up with GX, which ran until about 2008, 5Ds, which ran until 2011, Zexal, which ran until 2014, Arc 5, which ran until 2017, and Brains, which ran until 2019. Unfortunately, things get kinda murky from there. The Master Duel anime ended after Brains, and then we got the Yu-Gi-Oh! Rush Duel anime, which doesn't even play the usual game. The Brains and post-anime eras of the game are usually what I mean when I say modern Yu-Gi-Oh! This is very rough, but I think it gets the gist across. The eras of the game that I usually have the most fun with are the 5D, Zexal, and Arc 5 eras. I usually kind of lump these together into what I call the extra deck epoch. This was the period of time where every few years we would get a new kind of extra deck summoning method and a new anime to go along with it. Here is where I like to play Yu-Gi-Oh! The most, and just so we're all on the same page, I classify the Duel Monsters and GX era as the early days. The point here again is to figure out why I seem to enjoy the extra deck epoch more and why I don't seem to enjoy the modern game. I should probably also tackle the most obvious elephant in the room right away: nostalgia. The easy answer for why I enjoy older eras and don't love the modern ones is the simple fact that this is what the game was when I was a kid. I turned 10 in 2008, and I turned 18 in 2016. That means the extra deck epoch, as I have established it, almost perfectly encapsulates the period where I was the target demographic for Yu-Gi-Oh! In the first place. Everything that came after that wasn't technically intended for me, but for the new generations. Surely the nostalgia factor would then answer all of my questions, right? Well, yeah, it does answer some of them. I'd be lying if I told you that rewatching Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds doesn't evoke fond memories of when I did the same thing as a boy, and playing the card game as it existed at that time period does the same thing. However, nostalgia doesn't totally cover it. I mean, it's definitely a factor, but it isn't the only part of the equation. I've been playing and watching Yu-Gi-Oh! Since almost the beginning of the franchise in the West. I remember coming home every day, desperate to see how Yugi would get out of whatever danger he was in during Duelist Kingdom. I remember when the Egyptian god cards were played for the first time. Yet, I don't have nearly the same fond memories for the early days as I do for the extra deck epoch, even though I probably should have them at least at a similar level. I've been playing video games from that era as long as I have for the others as well, but my enjoyment levels don't extend that far. The peak of my enjoyment is contained in and around the extra deck epoch. Yeah, I was older during that period and understood the game better, but if nostalgia alone was the deciding factor in my enjoyment, that shouldn't really matter. So, what actually is it? Now that I've eliminated nostalgia as an all-encompassing answer, let's dig into the nitty-gritty. The first place we should probably start is how these two generations actually functions when it comes to playing the game. Now, there are a lot of stuff I could highlight about how Yu-Gi-Oh! Has changed over time. The late and great Yu-Gi tuber Alex Simo, who I obviously miss quite dearly, was often fond of calling the shift in Yu-Gi-Oh! Power over time by saying the game became Yu-Gi-Oh! 2 at some point, and that's an apt metaphor. The modern game has a lot more power, each individual card matters a lot more, and games usually last no more than a few turns, even between more casual decks, to the point that it feels like a completely different game at times. Yet it's similar enough to be recognizable, while still being different all the same. Meanwhile, a lot of the games I was playing in Tag Force and Over the Nexus were slow. Many of my turns consisted of summoning a monster, playing a card or two face down, and then passing my turn. One thing I noticed while undergoing this more critical examination that was kind of interesting was I often used less cards in my older games than in duels from the modern era. I think logically one would assume that a game that has more turns would see more cards played, but outside of a handful of dedicated stall strategies that made the game last a really long time, most of the duels I was in during that old era didn't. One of the ways that modern cards are so much more powerful than their ancestors is in advantage generation. Take for instance my modern DDD deck. Nearly every card I play has an effect that gets me another card, and that card gets me another card. Now this is an infamously combo heavy deck, I will admit that, but it does illustrate how much one can combo in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Meanwhile, my decks in these old games were often lucky to play more than a few cards a turn, and I normally didn't get more cards out of the deal. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing when it comes to card design? Neither really, however, it does change your relationship with each individual card a little bit. Because I know there's a finite number of extra cards I could reasonably pull in each turn, it made me think long and hard about what the individual cards in my hand were capable of. Overextending feels like a problem I have more in older games than the newer ones, as I could push towards the win in an aggressive manner, but if that face down was a mirror force, I could lose all of my advantage and not have the means to come back from that. I think this is a mode of gameplay that I do enjoy more because it rewards both risky strategies and conservative ones. In a lot of video games and RPGs, I normally play heavy defensive characters. My usual thought pattern is that if I'm not dying, then eventually I'll beat the bad guy. The older and slower form of Yu-Gi-Oh! Allows for a similar playstyle. I can design my deck to be about constant pressure instead of the more energetic power plays that are common in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! It isn't just the way the cards interact on the field that is different between the 2 points of time. Even before you get to duel at all, the cards that make it into your deck in the first place have changed dramatically over time. Namely, in a realm of what counts as a staple card. Staple cards have been around since the beginning of the game, and the term is usually used to classify cards that are generic enough to be slotted into most, if not all decks, regardless of that deck's game plan or archetype. Both the old and the new school have these generic staples, but they've changed a lot over time. Many of the staples from the extra deck epoch that I love in the early days overlap. We're looking at cards like Mirror Force, Monster Reborn, Giant Trunade, and Lightning Vortex. Some of these staples from the early days were so good that they ended up limited or banned. Nearly every deck had at least some cards like that, and you had to be prepared for them when you played. The extra deck epoch, as I refer to it, had a few more, like Stardust Dragon, Trishula, Dragon of the Ice Bearer, Ally of Justice Canister, Silent Honor Arc, or Abyss Dweller. Modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Has its staples too, like Nibiru the Primal Being, Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, Dimension Shifter, or the Molcharmies. Did you notice the difference in what staples are over the years? The early days introduced staples that were primarily solid spells and traps. They either generated an obvious advantage like Monster Reborn or Upstart Goblin, or they punished the opponent for overextending, like Mirror Force or Lightning Vortex. The extra deck epoch introduced staples that were a bunch of strong but generic extra deck monsters that generally required you to commit some resources into them to get any true value out of them. The modern staples are primarily hand traps. Now, disruption has been a thing since the game began. That's literally the entire point of trap cards. But hand traps are different for two reasons that really annoy me specifically. First, disruption in these older eras of games could cost you a match but you usually had at least a decent chance to recover, if you played your cards right. Not always, but the slower pace of the game usually meant you'd get the chance to play something else eventually. With the fast pace of a modern game, one hand trap can end the game if deployed at the right time. Secondly, they're all monsters? Look, I said at the beginning of the video that this is going to be pretty subjective, right? Well, it's also kind of arbitrary. When it comes to deck building, I normally really enjoy for my deck to be in one of two opposing categories. I either like my deck to be strictly one archetype, or I like my deck to be a collection of largely unrelated monsters who are connected thematically. The deck I've been using while playing World Championship 2011 is an entirely dark attributed deck with the exception of the extra deck. The deck I play in the paper game is a 100% pure DDD build that uses no staples. Are either of these decks optimal on a competitive level? No, but they're mine, and I like that each monster I play is directly related to the overall point of the deck. For whatever reason, when a powerful generic staple that doesn't require resource commitment is a spell or trap, I don't usually have an issue with it. And I've been trying to rack my brain for years to figure out why it bothers me to have hand traps in my deck, but I never get bothered by keeping stuff like Mirror Force or Monster Reborn around, and I think the answer usually comes down to theming. While every card in a deck, to a degree, represents what that deck is thematically, the monsters do the most heavy lifting in this regard. Every archetype has their own unique style in terms of monster design, the inspirations behind them, and how these monsters end up relating to each other. And even if you don't play a hard archetype deck, this still kind of applies. When an anime character like Yusei Fudo plays a monster, that creature normally represents something about him as a character. Many of his monsters are either speed-based or machinery-based, referencing his love of duel runners, his engineering skills, or his background growing up in the scrap heaps of the satellite sector. The theme of the literally scrappy underdog is present in nearly every monster he plays, just like the themes of hard archetype decks are present in all of their monsters. Including a bunch in my DDD deck turns it from an army of powerful interdimensional conquerors who love contract law for some reason into an army of powerful interdimensional conquerors who love contract law and also this one little girl and a jellyfish thing. There is a loss of theming with every monster hand trap I have to include in my decks to make them playable, and that really bothers me. If Konami printed spell and trap versions of every hand trap and then gave them identical effects, I honestly think it wouldn't bother me as much as it does. I know that's probably weird and kind of stupid, but I just really hope someone understands what I mean when I say that. That actually covers it for everything I want to talk about specifically on the gameplay side of this discussion. There are probably some more specifics I could find, but this script is already 10 pages long, so I'll just trust that what I have was able to get my general point across. There is another factor in this new v old school discussion that I feel is important to point out, and that's everything outside of the actual game. Remember how I categorized the eras of Yu-Gi-Oh? I used the different anime series to describe each time period and then lumped some of them together. The anime has been one of the core parts of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Experience for nearly as long as the franchise has existed. It literally predates the card game, as the anime was inspired by the manga and both were being made before the first cards were ever rolling out the printing press. The last chapter of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga came out in 2024. The last episode of the anime came out last year in 2025. Both of those were already massive departures from the main game of Yu-Gi-Oh! As they were Yu-Gi-Oh! Go Rush, and that was based on the Yu-Gi-Oh! Rush Duel game, a version that as of right now is not playable in the West outside of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links. The last Master Duel anime ended in 2019 with Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains, 7 years ago. This permanently separated a central pillar of what made Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! The thing the anime did that was so great for the franchise is that it gave the game context. I have tried multiple times in my life to get into other trading card games like Magic the Gathering or Pokemon or Alestrals, and all these games are fun in their own right, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Made my cards matter by showing me a world where what happens in the card game comes to life. The world of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is one of the best parts about playing the game. Even now, as an adult, regardless of the era of the game I'm playing, when I duel, I imagine myself in the anime, with a dual disc strapped to my arm and cards in my hand. I imagine what it would look like for my monsters to come to life, what the effects of my spells and traps activating would actually do to the monsters on the field. I even like to come up with stuff like summoning chants and attack names for some of my favorite cards. The anime and the manga gave me the ability, and not having them kind of kills them, at least to some extent. Now the anime and the manga didn't disappear for no reason. It has been stated by the writers for both that they were having a hard time scripting duels in the later eras because of how powerful the cards had become. The power creep issue, which exists in all long-running games like this, just became too much to bear. While I don't have a fix for that, I can lament it. I would love to see more animated adventures of dudes with absurd hair playing children's card games, and it sucks that we're not gonna get new versions of that anymore. Now, Konami is still doing some things, like Yu-Gi-Oh! The card game The Chronicles, that web series, but that isn't even about dueling. It's about the lore of the cards themselves, not the game being played. I know Magic the Gathering has expanded lore through their books and other medium, and I am well versed in Pokemon lore, but the thing that makes these games different is how they expect the player to interact with their world. If you want to experience the lore of Magic the Gathering, the best place to go would be the books, and all that sort of thing. If you want to experience the world of Pokemon, the video games are way better than the trading card game at immersing the player. However, if you wanted to get into the world of Yu-Gi-Oh!, you might watch the show, and in the show, they play the games, which means the show is telling you the best way to get into the world was to play the game. The two created a feedback loop of immersion, where both supported each other in ways that the other major card games don't do nearly as well. There is one final point I do want to make here, and I think it might be one of the ones that Konami absolutely has the means to fix: the single player experience. The hard part about loving any trading card game is that it is inherently a social activity. You need another person to participate, which means you need someone that you get along with, someone who is down to play the game in a similar way that you enjoy playing the game, someone who is available to play with you in the first place, and all of that can be pretty hard to do. If you don't have anyone to play with, there are things like Master Duel, which can pair you with randos around the world, so you can play at all, but it doesn't fully scratch the itch when it comes to the desire to play the games on terms you enjoy the most. And that's why I keep resorting to games like the World Championship Series and Tag Force. The thing that makes these games so engaging to me is that I can play them at my own pace. I can immerse myself in the world of Yu-Gi-Oh! Without the need to find someone else who operates on my ideal power and skill level. It has been years since we've gotten a video game with a solid single-player experience in it, when they used to be an almost ubiquitous part of the franchise, nearly as much as the anime was. And Konami is a video game company as well, which makes it more infuriating to some extent. However, if I had a solid single-player world of Yu-Gi-Oh! That I could play around in, I think I could enjoy modern Yu-Gi-Oh's gameplay nearly as much as I do the older stuff. But Konami just doesn't want to give us that. I guess that means I'll keep hanging around these old DS games for as long as I can. That about wraps up all the big points I wanted to make. Now let me reiterate that I do not think that modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Is bad. It just does a lot of stuff that I personally don't enjoy. And if you enjoy it, that's great, and I hope you keep enjoying it. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a great game, both historically and presently. However, when it comes to how the game plays, how decks are built, and how the world of Yu-Gi-Oh! Can best be experienced, I'm gonna be stuck in the past for just a little bit longer. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Am I onto something here, or am I just a bitter old man who can't handle change? I mean, probably that last one, but let me know either way. And hey, I've been Landon. This is Landon-Core. Please like the channel, subscribe for more content, share the video with your friends, and I will see you in the next video. Until then, bye.